Well, hey, welcome to another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful. I'm your host, Josh Dietrich. Today, I am excited to have a Californian here today who's now recently a transplant to Minnesota. In the house is a mentor of mine and a father of four, a grandfather of five. He's an author and a soon-to-be a second-time author.
That's right.
Very exciting to introduce Mr. Zane Hall. Zane, how are you today?
I'm doing all right.
That's good.
I should have not gotten the haircut yesterday.
Why?
Knowing that introduction of Californian was coming.
Oh, you should have kept the flow.
Should have kept the flow.
Did you have it going?
It was going down to the shoulders. Yeah.
So is that why you're wearing the hat today?
Well, this was like submitting to my wife.
Yeah. wear the hat covered up. I mean, I get it. My wife often reminds
wisdom
me.
comes with less hair.
Yeah.
So,
well, I had a theory actually this weekend. I have a father who was also bald, and I was trying to create this new theory that, you know, we were all too concerned about our hair as kids looking in the mirror, and God showed us that he had to humble us, right?
Yeah.
That it didn't really matter. Because I have a kid, I have a 13-year-old now that's obsessed with his hair and looking in the mirror. I'm like, you're going to lose it too, man.
Hair is a source of pride. So yeah.
Totally. And now now it's just a thing, you know, it's a thing I have to take care of like a beard. But well, what do people need to know about you and your success? As growing up, I think, you know, coming from the West Coast and sort of now being in between in your childhood before you built your career, what was your vision of success and what did you want to build for your life?
Gosh. My father was a serial entrepreneur in a bad way. You know,
okay, I haven't heard that context.
Yeah, I haven't heard that yet. But everything he tried failed. You know, all his businesses failed. He drank a lot and that sort of thing. So I was actually thinking about this, you know, when we talked, was that I don't think I was motivated to be successful, but I became a believer in 5th grade, and there's a verse that just literally stuck with me from, I don't know, late teenage years, was that I asked the Lord to not give me so much money that I would forget about him, and not give me so little that I'd despise him, you know?
Right.
And that's actually a verse in Proverbs that just stuck in my mind throughout my entire life.
We got to capture that and put it in the notes. That's cool. Do you remember it now?
It's like Proverbs 30:18 or something like that. Right. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So that I was probably motivated by both fear of failure and fear of success.
Oh man.
I was motivated by both.
So having that kind of viewpoint, how did you play it safe? Because it's not really playing it safe strategy. You don't go out to play it safe, but it happened in some ways.
When I graduated college, I set myself a goal. I said, you know, if I make 40 grand by the time I'm 40, that's perfect.
Well, we go back some years, so that might have been more like, you know, today's money, double that.
Sure, yeah, maybe. But no, I wasn't motivated by you know, some sort of goal that I was trying to get to or something like that. I was just probably more circumspect, you know, but and worried about both sides.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of unusual, I guess.
So
you know?
Growing up with that mindset, because I feel like that does paint a picture.
Yeah.
Same with me. Like your path went more corporate.
Yeah.
Right. And mine, I had this perception too of a father that was an entrepreneur. His thing didn't fail, but his thing didn't grow.
Yeah.
His thing slowly, you know, the saying innovate or die.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, the industry he was in, and my grandfather on the other end worked very hard and made good money. And so there was no sexiness in either of those not being available. So what you're saying is through the circumstances, you found some success.
Well, security, you know, putting your security in a career and security in your savings, you know, that did actually affect me, you know. And so I think throughout the entire time, just trying to really understand what it meant to put treasures in heaven and where the hope was and that sort of thing was there. But even having that awareness didn't prevent me from being infected by the world's views, you know?
I agree. And it's really a hard thing because we live in a world, and our life and our lifestyle and the things we have,
Yeah.
it's like requires income. It requires a level of success to maintain that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. And we are technically all very rich, right? In the grand scheme of the world. But let's talk about, from a United States perspective, let's talk about the magnitude of the corporations and the size and maybe what that looks like for your role leading teams. How big?
Well, so I worked in my career. I worked in semiconductors my entire career. In the 90s when I started in semis, high tech was semis. That was the same.
That was the tech.
The high tech, and so it kind of shifted through the years to be seen as more low tech, but it's incredibly high tech. But the shift towards software kind of took away from that. But then, sure enough, pandemic, everything came back to semiconductors. So I worked at 3 multinational global semis, and the first one was Broadcom. Broadcom was a company that basically founded the internet. Look, I mean, not to take too much credit for that, but the technologies behind internet communications are just stunning. And to be in, the invention of the DOCSIS standards,
Crazy.
That kind of thing.
Crazy.
How data flows through the internet and what the internet even is. And so they're right there at the beginning, putting the hardware into cable modems, inventing broadband, all that kind of stuff. And so I was a part of that flow.
Wow.
How
big a company was that? Now?
Well, it started as a startup and
really?
when I left the company, it was running about $8 billion. And that took 10 years to get to $8 billion.
10 years.
Yeah. That's a pretty fast growth.
Mm-hmm. So hold on to the rocket ship.
Oh, it was a rocket ship for sure. Yeah.
And semiconductors are still now so much into demand that you can't make enough of them.
Yeah. The demand keeps growing, and that was kind of unexpected. Or it was kind of seen that would table off, but Internet of Things and the pervasiveness of analog connectivity and even AI today and stuff just continues to be unending in the level of integration and capturing data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we talk about Broadcom, and then kind of the rest of your 30 some years. And so how long did you spend at Broadcom, and what did that look like?
I was there about 12 years, and then we'll talk about that transition a little bit, I think. But I ended up moving to a semiconductor company in the Bay Area. It was called Maxim Integrated, analog focus. Okay. Broadcom was much more digital. And that was transformational in so many ways. But analog at that point was much more elevators and ovens, just kind of slow growth. But then the pandemic came along, and all of a sudden analog is the hottest thing.
So you're saying the recent pandemic, as in COVID.
The much more, it wasn't really seen how important analog would be in the world of communications and devices and stuff.
So how would you put that in perspective today? How important it still is?
It's almost becoming it's the hottest growth area.
Analog,
yeah. I think it is. I mean, you have to consult the authorities on that, but it's definitely became the hottest area. Cars, automotive, supply chain stuff that you didn't realize how much was built into those things until the supply chain really cramped down on that.
I see. And then so from there we're talking that's the analog company. Was that your last stop or no?
No. So my company was acquired by Analog Devices. That's the name of a company.
Oh, really?
So analog acquiring analog made perfect sense. And that acquisition happened. I thought that when that acquisition happened, that would be my last day at work. But it turned out they wanted me to put in a data strategy for them, and I got to do that.
Acqui-hire. So you came along with the package?
It was. Now, you sort of, when that happens, you're afraid of like, when am I going to get let go? But then suddenly your fear becomes, when do I get to leave?
Because now that you're fully engaged, we need you, and you're like, I can't give it everything.
Yeah, but I had a chance to, just the way the acquisitions work, I had a chance to take a package, and I thought, I looked at that situation and said, I could spend 6 years slogging through it here, or I could go write a book about it and see how many companies I could help,
Yeah. So that was your path.
That's the path.
That's the path. So in all of that, right, helping these companies in this industry that sort of didn't exist but exploded, right? You're learning the importance of data clearly through devices, but what was your biggest financial win in going from zero, practically nothing to 10 billion, but then in another part of an organization that got acquired and being asked to stay on? What did that look like for you?
Well, that little story I told you about fearing wealth and fearing failure. When Broadcom started, that was we caught the wave of the stock market booms, and so me and everybody else in the company, including the janitor or the maintenance guy, suddenly had equity that was beyond what most people had ever even
considered
imagined,
or thought of, right?
And had balance sheets that were just enormous.
You didn't see that implode, or did it continue?
It imploded badly. Like for individuals.
Like cashing out and how they used?
Well, like for example, there's lots of little stories about that. When you're on the inside and you see how people react to that amount of unexpected wealth,
I can
two things
imagine,
happen,
right?
One is they do stupid things, and two is they think they deserved it, But like the building maintenance guy, as soon as the stock hit $100, he went out and bought a Corvette. And the license plate flame says, "Thank you, Broadcom." And everybody just laughed at him a year later when the stock hit 300. That was a $500,000 Corvette,
Oh my god!
What a stupid thing,
Right. But you could go in the other direction, and obviously not always having a crystal ball.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So did you wait? Were you more wise in that, or did you follow his footsteps?
We didn't spend money before it was.
Oh yeah.
We didn't spend before it was actually there.
You did or didn't?
Did not.
Did not.
Yeah,
okay. Good. I think it's easy to do.
Yeah.
Whether we're a commission organization or a bonus organization, and spending money, it requires discipline. So I'm curious about that. As you're seeing this wealth grow, and let's call it on paper, right? It's a stock, but it's a balance sheet, personal balance sheet. And I don't care if it's in cash or stock or in a company you own that might be illiquid, right? It's that you are now entrusted with something far greater than you ever thought you'd have to deal with, right? So being a person not ready to have that sort of wow, and being fear of failure, how long did it take you to kind of process why you were blessed with that and what you're going to do with that blessing?
Well, every day, I don't know. It kind of, fortunately, we didn't really make any, and I'm thankful to the Lord that there's an awareness of this. The effect that it had on me that was more concerning and unexpected is being a source of pride. Thankfully, I had an awareness of kind of the dangers and didn't do too many stupid things about that. But the idea of, when the Lord says put treasure in heaven, I think he really means that you do not need to build up your barn. You do not need a nest egg that's, because one of the things that happens when you have money is you spend it immediately in your mind. Even if you haven't spent it, you're already counting on it right here, and your hope is there when it really should be up there, so.
That's a good reminder. For all of us, right? And like, even what we do have and what we strive for, whether it's what we have today isn't enough to feed our families. And that's a hard balance, right? Because we have to eat today and we have to provide. And so sometimes we get stuck between present and present future and future, which is sort of this mental state, right? And so I think aligning ourselves on values and don't store our treasure on this earth where moths and rust can destroy.
That's right. Yeah.
That's incredible. So in this fast learning, and if we think back your college degree and then the immersive explosion in this industry, like what are you most proud of? Claim to fame from a data side, and because we move more into the analytics and BI, right? So
So, back in 1999, 2000, the idea that analytics was a strategic direction for a company wasn't even on the radar. It wasn't
Not
even,
even that long
nobody
ago.
would have even thought of that back then. And so for Broadcom to have that vision, it was a very visionary leadership. There are 400 PhDs working around me,
Wow.
literally. Not to mention 8,000 other brilliant engineers, but for them to have that vision and they didn't even know what it meant, but they brought me in, and why they chose me to drive that, who knows?
Do you know why they kept you though?
It worked.
See, that's always this answer.
It worked,
Yep.
Well, it was a brilliant idea, but I already had this analytic mindset. And so it wasn't really, they didn't bring somebody in who had experience. They brought somebody in who maybe thought a certain way, and so and I had some relationships that kind of opened that door. So, but now I forgot the question, but
claim to fame in that.
Yeah. Well, in that particular period, just seeing the acceleration of thought within a company was stunning, and so it just from a career accomplishment, just to be a part of that and really kind of be underneath driving that and kind of forming the thought of a company, it was spectacular. Now it was also chaotic.
Oh, I bet. I can imagine.
Rocket
ships are. Yep.
The speed of thought at that company, the speed of the business growth. We were acquiring 15 companies a year. I mean, in integrating them, and the ability to pull that off requires a pretty high level of integration.
So, in the data world, and talking about the PhDs, are you talking about using data models that, like, that's what they'd be engineering, or the PhDs' roles in this? And how did you work with the PhDs? That caught my attention because when you're dealing with an enterprise with all of these resources, right? I'm curious how the PhDs and the engineers fit in with what you're doing, because you're taking a vision and implementing, using the resources you have to implement a solution that serves the goal that the vision has, right? So walk us through that.
Sure. Semiconductors themselves, the nature of, it's a computer chip, it's a circuit. The nature of it is integration, putting a lot of things together, and they all work together in synchronization, And so that's how an engineer thinks, integration. So they just had this expectation that everything should work together. So when you had a projection for, when you had and Broadcom was a startup, so there was no history there.
Right.
There's no data.
It's all forward looking.
There's no data to analyze. It's all about the future.
Yep.
They had this idea that, if I think I can improve the cost on this project, that should affect the margin, and that should show the profitability of the company. They expected that if I make a change to the yield on a product, I should immediately be able to see the impact on 3 years from now profit.
Right.
And their expectation that should happen right now. I had high expectations I had to live up to be able to deliver that. And so I didn't really invent that idea that things should be that fast moving, integrated. It was just the normal expectation of a PhD engineer. But what we ended up doing, this was one of the amazing things about Broadcom, is because we were able to support that expectation, we literally got 5,000 engineers giving us their thoughts about the future and transforming that into data that we could use.
Man. So that data is intent. And again, I think what the fundamental here is to inform decision making, right?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
how much input, right? Inputs are required, and what infrastructure is needed to take all of that input information. Because that's really what it is. You can't analyze that kind of stuff manually.
Well, I mean, you hit it right on the head there, and people lose sight of this so easily. The point of a data strategy is to make better decisions. How do you connect those dots? I mean, most companies think, well, I have to go spend $30 million on an ERP system. That doesn't move the needle at all.
In fact, they'll spend a year or
it
two
might make
or
it
more.
worse.
Yeah, just to get it set up.
But that's the best answer that corporate leaders have.
Go get a new system.
Just spend money.
But sounds like in the leadership had a vision and it made sense and it worked to spend money in investing in data, because if they realized where the inefficiency was, right, they can decide on how to improve that, reduce the cost, and see where the benefit would be.
Yeah, they had, and again, it was an engineering company. They had no illusions that they would buy some software from somebody else that would solve their problem. It was all make it here, But they also understood that, it's the thought behind it that matters, and that expectation for integration. Nobody had an assumption that could be done by anybody else than us.
Well, I mean, when you're pioneering something, right? And you mentioned it, like, you don't have past performance to predict on. You have nothing but ideas that you have to build, and depends on the leader and how big the vision is, right? That can be crazy. So, okay, shift gears slightly to small business, right? And so I think what's amazing is data has been so democratized with so much tech that even small business now has access to make informed decisions, and where do you see that line being very clear between massive ROI and using big data and a business intelligence platform? What size company is that really useful? How would you know if you're going to get an ROI out of it?
Yeah. I mean, the range of applications for a data strategy are really broad. And I get into this a lot in the book, but collaboration becomes more important the bigger the company. But there's also this aspect of getting data flowing. And at a small company, this totally applies big and small, is when your systems align with your thought, that's where you start getting velocity.
Got it.
And so I manage now, as I'm board chair of Common Ground. And there's 4 of us. But the decision making we have to make is, to a certain extent, data kind of does describe the decisions. We have to manage money, we have to make investments.
Right. At a different scale, but it's still the driver.
We also have 100 donors who support us, right? So tweaking the way, so there's a stupid example, but getting the way we do business to align with the way we think about the business, totally applied. We get sources of income from 3 different types of platforms. Getting those to all provide data consistently in the format that we think about things. So we think about our donors in 3 categories.
In buckets, right?
We think of them in 3 categories. What I discovered was the way we deposit checks makes it so that information just isn't flowing through, So I had to change the way we deposit checks. So the simple idea for a small business is make sure your processes are aligning with the way you think about the business. Because what you end up finding is people are kind of kludging it together.
And they do it for the sake of doing it sometimes.
Yeah. And so therefore they don't think about it like the donors. They don't think about it in those categories on a daily basis. They just think about it once a year when they have to talk to the donors, So if you can change the way you think, because your donors, you do have to think about it in that structure. You do have to analyze it.
Got it.
If you can take that analytic view and make it the everyday view, that's what you do.
And it's part of, aligning culture, all the way from the top to the bottom. And you can align that on a mission and communicate the effort groups and organizations are putting forth, and in the classic, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And so many different things. So speaking of that, in the grand scheme of running West Coast, Silicon Valley, and seeing all the tech, and I even believe you had some commuting back and forth. How are the demands being an executive and in this world? How did it impact your family?
Sure.
And where did you find the ability to navigate priority in the right way?
The time demands are a factor. I won't deny that, but probably not the most damaging factor.
Okay. So it could have been worse?
Could have been. Well, you can sort of manage that because you're making enough money. You can just pay people to do the stuff that you don't have time for.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a little bit of a prideful thing. That just being in that paradigm does stoke a little pride, but you can manage, you can sort of recognize that. But what you can't recognize is how what's harder, I should say, is when you're in this realm of accomplishments and that sort of thing, you tend to treat everything else the same way. And so I did find myself in a situation where, I was basically measuring my kids' performance. I mean, I shouldn't laugh about it, but it's just reality. I was,
we all do, I think,
grading my kids according to their work performance. I was CEO of my family. My wife and kids were employees.
How did you measure your success as a CEO, COO, as a family?
Yeah, I mean, I had goals, and
for you and the kids,
just what they would do, and maybe not in their own accomplishments, but I had a daughter who was a college athlete, so I was pretty proud of that.
And that required probably a lot of good dad coaching along the way.
Yeah, I was a good coach.
And
I thought.
You thought,
but took credit for it.
But in that season, you found time to be impactful, you believe? Or if you were to undo that, I see big mistakes between guys having their attention solely on success that way.
Well, okay. So, there was a recognition. And so life is very layered.
Yeah.
What's happening in your family life, what's happening in your work life, in your relationship with guys, those are just all intertwined. And the pride that was stoked in all the areas, it wasn't, it was affecting everything.
Okay.
My pride affected my parenting, affected my marriage, affected the way I managed and work. And for the mercy of God to show that to me at a moment was, it's just the mercy of God. Did
you have any tough lessons that you had to learn to change the way you think?
Yeah.
Give us an example of something.
I'll tell you about why I left Broadcom. How's that sound?
That's a meaty one.
That's a meaty one. Why I left Broadcom. It wasn't my decision. Okay. How do I explain it? So, there was a moment where I was highly recognized and rewarded at Broadcom. The success was rewarded a lot. But then an HR guy kind of came to me and said, "Hey, did you know that all your employees hate you?"
Whoa.
Now, it wasn't all the employees, but the employees who were
working
performing really well loved me. The employees that weren't performing well didn't like me. And my answer was, they're not performing, And so that was that I didn't hear that message, but then through a variety of other circumstances, the Lord humbled me. Our daughter was struggling with some things, and interestingly, when it came to the work, that was all me. But when it came to the family, Kelly she and I were kind of in the same lane with these things. And so the Lord kind of humbled us both in a parenting realm. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, we both recognized that we weren't managing by grace. We were parenting by grace. We were parenting by law, and we were just very disappointed and proud. Yeah. We were just both overly proud and overly disappointed about our own parenting, And so that came crashing down on us from a recognition point of view. We couldn't solve our kids' problems, and we were getting more distant from our oldest daughter and that sort of thing. And it hit us like a ton of bricks. I just remember that moment. Kelly, her hairdresser read it out to her. She was sitting there getting a hairdresser, and her hairdresser just called her out.
Oh my gosh.
On that. And we had a dinner plan that night. We sat down at dinner, and she says, "You're not going to believe what happened to me. My hairdresser called me out. She's right." And then I had all this recognition at work where I was treating people. And so we just sort of had a moment where, we were just humbled.
Was your wife working at that time, or she was home?
No, she was not working at that time.
Okay. And so amazing, right? To have someone, especially hairdressers, right? We go back to them, we get to know them a little bit.
Yeah.
They get to speak truth into our lives, whether we want it or not, right? Because that vulnerability exists as we share our stories, right? And so amazing how God used her to plant a picture in your wife's brain,
right?
Who actually that night was able to convince you or compel you to see things differently.
Yeah.
That inspired you to make a change?
Well, prior to that moment, and prior to that kind of that moment in time, when I saw our kids, if I was disappointed in my kids, I blamed it on my wife.
Oh, that's that pride.
Yeah.
Right?
And then she wasn't performing well enough, but then.
Did she have the same view on pride as you did? Or was it?
Yeah, we both blamed each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hers wasn't pride. She was just trying to control things, I think.
But it spoke to her in her sin struggle, let's call it.
Yeah.
And that was able to then be conveyed to you in a way that related to your sin struggle.
What happened is suddenly my recognition of her wisdom just,
I love when that happens.
So it was beautiful, but that started us on a new path. And now I'll tell you why I left Broadcom.
Okay. I like it.
Just before that time, a friend who was a mentor from college was messaging me saying, how's it going? He was aware of our daughter's struggle. Mm-hmm. And when he said, how's your daughter doing? I replied, my company's doing really well. That essentially, and I didn't even recognize that I had done that. That was just a summary. And when I replied to him, I revealed some financial information about the company unintentionally. So then we have this moment where we recognize, and so now set that aside for a moment. We had this moment where the Lord revealed to us, my way of managing at work changed. It just changed. And the people who work for me, I wanted to fix that, and I wanted to repair those relationships. And so I was allowed to, I say allowed by the Lord, to spend about 2 years writing those things. And it was wonderful. That moment where I shared that information, I got called in one day, and they brought this memo up, email that I had written 4 years earlier, and said, did you know 4 years ago you revealed some financial information? I'm like, where did that come from?
Was it publicly traded at that time?
Yes.
At the time you wrote it, the information?
Yes. Yeah. So I didn't know I had violated a company policy 4 years ago, but it was a fireable offense.
Isn't that there a statute of limitations on that?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, right.
That's what I thought. It's like, how did this happen?
Oh, wow.
And like, I didn't do that was nothing there's no intent to do anything wrong, but you know what? And so I was rocked by that, because I was so invested in that identity. But then the Lord told me through a really freaky way that, you really did deserve that. Not for the reason that they're firing you for, but the motive behind what made you did that. You did need that, And so what happened was I was out of a job. Kids are in college, the whole thing. And and the Lord had already worked on our hearts. And then somehow just it turned around that one of my past mentors called me and asked me to go work up in the Bay in Silicon, right in the heart of Silicon Valley.
How long did that take between the transition period?
I was out of work for about a week.
Oh,
it was terrible. I mean, it was rocked me,
For real?
Yes.
But then being picked right back up, was your head still in the old game? I'm guessing that probably affected you a little bit into the transition. Oh
yeah. I mean, it was everything changed. I hated flying,
man.
It had always been a heads down guy, but suddenly I'm dealing with it. But this change had happened, and
you're talking about the one in your heart?
Oh yeah. And the Lord was just dragging us through things, that we didn't want to do. Anyway, so I went up to this company and immediately recognized it was one of the most toxic environments I could go into. But on the other hand, and it was incredibly challenging from many perspectives. Relationally, people were kind of on me and that whole thing. And so, but I had new resources, and that dark place, I just totally felt called to it, But
because probably the preparation that happened prior.
I wasn't motivated. My motives had completely changed.
You recognized that what had happened in your past, and how pride got in the way, allowed you to change
100%. Yeah.
And then you're able to carry that forward in a way,
where
it was actually really needed of you.
Yeah.
Probably to bring that perspective.
Yeah. It was in the work environment, and but it was the work environment, but also the success of the company. We're all burdened by the toxicity within the environment,
So what was your strategy around, because you had to probably have a strategy knowing that, okay, there's a business challenge here,
Yeah.
right? And there's a culture challenge here.
Yeah.
And the lesson I learned is when we're kicking butt, it's black and white. You're either performing or you're not.
Yeah.
But that new grace perspective, right? That transformation in your mind allowed you to see people maybe as relational humans, have maybe some more grace. But how did that, I'm curious to hear how that culture changed. And how long were you there?
11 years.
So how did God use that change in you for good?
Well, when you go into an environment and you're not motivated by your own success, you're not, your motive is not your own success. I mean, you want to do your job well,
of course, right?
But your motive has completely changed. Then you can work for the work. You can work for the sake of the work. You can work for the sake of the people. And you really are able to just give up things that don't matter.
100%.
I don't really care if I get credit for these things.
Right.
And it takes a while for people to really see and trust you. And it did. It took about 3-4 years, for some people longer. Some people were like literally out to ruin my success there,
Whoa.
Literally.
Because of what?
When somebody's brought in to solve your problems, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I get it. Actually, this story I heard from a guy yesterday. He was original business owner, and wife and son know that there was a challenge in the business, toxicity and things.
Yeah,
they brought in an expert, a turnaround guy. 2-1, the son and the mom overruled the owner, the main guy.
Yeah.
And before he came, the consultant, the conversation was, I'm going to make your life hard every single day until you're gone. Right?
Yeah.
His motivation was, I don't need the help. I'm stubborn. I don't want to learn.
Right.
It was his pride, right?
Yeah.
And so, I can, that's so fresh in my mind. So you're
yeah.
opposed. Yeah. The view is opposition.
Well, so I'm that guy. I am the change agent.
You're the change agent. Yeah.
Some people saw me as the solution, and some people saw me as the problem.
Depends on the side of it. Yeah.
But so I had to navigate that in a large organization for years. And this is the phenomenal thing. So, maybe 5 years into this, and my wife in my life group are hearing about all this drama that I'm having to navigate. And they're like, every challenge they're praying about, and they're hearing about the individuals and how terrible they're acting towards me and stuff. And then about 5 years in, I go on a business trip I'm in Dublin, and there's this dinner for the department, and they said, hey, why don't you invite your wife along? She sat down next to me, and the guy who had been the worst enemy sat right next to her. So she's sitting between the two of us, and this guy sat, and I hope he hears this someday, he'll laugh, but he sat and explained to my wife just how much the relationship had changed him, and helped him.
No way.
Yeah, he just sat there the whole dinner, explained to my wife.
Did you know of that?
I didn't know that was coming.
And you heard all of this?
She like, is this the same guy I've heard about for all these years?
Was that after or before he started talking?
No, that was after.
Yeah, okay.
He's like,
this is that guy? This is not the same guy?
Yeah. And so it was phenomenal.
And he was above you?
We were peers.
Okay.
So that's where the competition really
got it. So you maybe had different objectives in some ways?
I was solving a lot of problems that he was probably causing. So that relative ended up being a wonderful relationship in the end.
Incredible. How long did that take?
And we're still connected. And that was probably 5 years just to get him to trust me,
So what is it about us humans, right? That,
by the way, he was one of a number of people, to get them to trust you.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But what is it about that, right? What is it about, the threat people feel of others?
Yeah.
And is that a pride thing? It's probably one of them.
I try not to spend a lot of time guessing other people's motives.
Right.
but we all know human nature. Yeah. They're competing just like everybody else. And, what is LinkedIn? It's about blowing your horn,
So how did you navigate humbly, talking about this specific thing? Like, what were your tools and what were your, your mindset and conversations like that led him to feel so compelled to share this with your wife?
The tool, the primary tool was God's word.
Oh, man.
And 1 Corinthians 4 verses 3-5. I think I repeated that verse every day
1
for
Corinthians
like
4?
5 years. 1 Corinthians 4, 3-5. It says, I don't really care about what you think of me. I'm totally paraphrasing. I don't care what you think about me. I don't even care what I think about me. It's the Lord who judges me. My conscience is clear, but that doesn't mean I'm innocent.
Yeah.
It's the Lord who judges us. Therefore, don't judge anybody's motives before the appointed time. The Lord will judge.
Isn't that hilarious? Like, simple commandment, love God, love others. If we just did that, just loving others, and recognize that our identity is not about what we allow people to perceive us to be, and that our identity is not, an ego that we're trying to protect. And like, so much drama comes from protecting my role and my job and my income and my team, right?
Yeah.
And
you
got
to trust the Lord with that stuff.
100%.
You don't have anywhere near as much control over those things as you think.
But I think what happens though, that's a slow fade thing.
Yeah.
That's a thing where we're going to go make it. I'm going to be self-made. We don't have the ability to give it to the Lord.
Yeah.
I really believe that we try to carry it on our own shoulders. Right. And so when you quote that scripture, that's the same thing. Like, I don't care what you think. I don't care what I think people think about me. I care about what he thinks about how I'm living.
Yeah.
Right. And if we change that, because accountability is not about he's going to smite us or send down the lightning bolt.
Yeah.
It's teaching us how to follow Jesus, which is the accountability we need. And so I feel like that's the big thing around the gospel and faith sticking, right? It's just something we believe, but I don't have to be held accountable to anything, in real time. And so we just carry it around on our shoulders.
Well, one of the things that passage really highlights, it creates a humility that is kind of beyond what you normally think of as humility. This idea that you understand your own motives. You don't. In that moment that happened to Kelly and I, that was just God revealing our motives to us that we didn't even know. You need something from the outside to reveal your inside.
Totally. There's a process, I think, that needs to happen more because I think we do it every day in business, right? You have a quarterly business review or a monthly business review. You look at financials. We spend so much money and time building culture and doing workshops and learning and growing and investing, around a business. But if we step back and look at all the other areas of our life, our fitness, our weight, our mental health, and, the relationship with our children and our wife, when those things are breaking while achieving this success, it is the oddest paradigm. And I think the struggle is we're not putting the same ability to force ourselves to think critically about our intentions in our relationships, in our own health, right? Like, we're so busy chasing. And I just think that's an amazing insight to say, I can't remember what word you just said. Did you say motives? Check your motives or check your
You don't even
intentions?
know your motives.
You don't even know them. But I think there's a process that you could explore your heart. Lord, search me.
Listen to the Lord, because he's telling you something about your motives every day.
Oh man. Oh, when you see that outside in thing, that perspective from your wife, for me, and it was as simple as I couldn't live with what I was hiding, from my wife, or I didn't really think I was that overweight until I saw a photo. Like, I've always been a healthy guy and the outside in, right? And so I didn't have motivation to get there. My motivation came from something completely unrelated to food. It was just the lifestyle. So my motivation to be successful, and that meant when I travel, it wasn't 100% travel. It was 50% travel, 50% vacation. Right. And so our motives are buried beneath. And so what I learned about anger even was just hilarious. Like, my motivation for getting angry, what is it? I had to realize this.
What's behind that?
I had to dig it out, and it's
Right.
control,
Yeah.
and pride
Yeah.
and selfishness, because I wanted what I wanted.
Yeah.
So how have you done that in the Word of God, right?
Yeah.
So using that as a tool, it's a word as a light unto our feet and a lamp unto our path.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, one thing that's first, I mean, God breaks down your stubborn pride. That's Leviticus 26:19.
That's scripture.
Yeah. He breaks down your stubborn pride, and that's a Hebrews. He disciplines those he loves. So it's a hard but important thing. But since then, I think for me, just having a group of guys that I'm totally transparent with, it's life-giving.
What do they not know about you? Because that would be you revealing it to the world.
Yeah.
I think they already know those.
Well, I write books, so people probably know more than I'd like them to, but no, those guys are, and it's a function of time as well. Because when you've been with a group of guys for 10 years, longevity is a factor. It's not something you flip a switch on, but when you commit to a group of guys, and you're also committing to a transparency, and when they start to get permission to ask you questions, but it's not just even asking questions like, I know I'm going to have to show up tomorrow morning
to talk
with those guys,
and they're going to ask me.
But they're going to say, what's going on?
Right.
And
right.
if I hide something, I'm just not being a friend.
Yeah. It's so good. And I think sometimes that is our biggest miss, that no one's asking us the hard questions.
Oh yeah. Guys are just Lone Rangers. That's a simple fact. That's not news.
The greatest serial killers are lonely white males, right?
Yeah.
So let's peel that back a little bit. I also think as you mature and the more wise you become, and if you've embraced community and you've embraced vulnerability, right? So I met you in our church just through connections of who we know.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was talking to a group of 6 or 7 at a coffee table, and you were one of them, right? Yeah. I'm sharing personal stuff, practically to the point of, divulging deep, dark secrets that once were secrets that are no longer, right? So when I show up in, what is it about, just because you said time, right? It takes time to build a rapport.
Yeah.
But there's also time as it relates to not our relationship, but our relationship in Christ that allowed us to unify. And I was able to pour stuff out to you, and I hardly knew you.
Yeah.
Vice versa, right? So I feel like the time factor is a direct relationship.
Sure. Yeah. There's this verse in James, and I can't recall the reference, but he says something like, confess your sins to one another.
Oh yeah.
My entire life, up until maybe 10 years ago, I thought that was the stupidest verse in the entire Bible. Why would anybody ever think that's a good idea? It's just, and it's also the scariest verse. Like for me, it was. To me, that was so out there. I couldn't even imagine maybe that made sense in the first century or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I kind of learned over time, not over time, actually these last 10 years or so, was that what he's describing is just a regular pace of life. That, being this position where, no, I'm constantly opening up. It's
part of who you are.
That is a governor over
100%,
you.
100%.
It's something that governs your daily practice. When you know that that's just the way I operate, that I'm confessing sins to one another, and it's in both ways. You see your friends in their weakness. It's true with your wife too.
100%.
Being transparent with your family. I mean, it's changed family relationships as well.
I think that is spot on, and I think we tend to think that it's sometimes so much me versus her.
Yeah.
And we have the same goal and vision, and everyone, we're aligned, we're husband and wife, but like the proof in the pudding of that is actually to the point where you say, I'm so okay with my relationship with my wife.
Trust.
I invite your feedback into my blind spots.
Yeah.
Right. And when you do that vulnerability, like, oh man, today, honey, there was this girl at the gym, I just have to tell you, right? I couldn't stop looking, right? And that's not a sin struggle, but as a man, my eyes do wander. Now it hasn't been the end all be all for me, but I think that's so powerful. So, so good. I could talk forever because, that's why I have this tattoo, Proverbs 27:17, man, is iron sharpens iron. One man sharpens another.
Yeah.
It's changed my life. And beyond just 10 guys or 4 guys or whatever the number ends up being for whoever it is, have somebody in your life.
It's not an easy thing to find.
It's not.
It requires
so how do you find it?
It requires a lot of trust.
Well, trust, but I think before trust, it's knowing. Trust is like, I'm willing to share that, but vulnerability is getting to a place where you're okay sharing it. The trust goes with who?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
Man. So on that note, okay. The amazing piece of all of this is humility and being able to recognize our flaws. But the simplest thing you can do is finding someone that you can trust. By law is a counselor. By law. And even to this day, there are relationship struggles with my wife and I that are just so silly. And you know what it ends up becoming? Telling my counselor what happened, how stupid it was, how bad it might have been, and then a couple questions. And this is what I love about AI in relating to counselors.
Okay.
AI is as good as what?
The data that goes in?
The prompt you give it.
Okay. Yes.
And the counselor's job is to prompt you with that PhD up there to pull the right stuff out. Guess what happens? Every time in that 1 hour. The thing that was bothering me when I walk in saying, I don't know what I'm going to talk about for the entire hour is the problem solved.
Yeah.
I go home and I get on my knees and say, honey.
Beautiful.
So amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I believe it 100%. So shifting gears slightly into this world of success, how do you view success now? Okay, so perspective is you have healthy kids, healthy grandkids, your life is past midlife, and your view of success now, when you're over the hill is different. What is it for you now? How do you want to finish strong?
Well, gosh, I could probably give a dozen different answers to that. I'm not going to say it's one thing, but listening to the Lord, just trying to be a listener. That's actually been over the last several years, probably 6 years, is just listening to what he's saying and being faithful in what I'm doing.
Dude,
I'm kind of in the Ecclesiastes lane right now. Give me my daily bread. Let me be faithful today. Let me not be proud enough to think that the future is not recognizing that, I'm fully in need of God's mercy.
Yep.
But he also loves me beyond. I mean, he's the God of the universe and he cares about me.
Yep.
Both are true. And I can just relax,
100%.
in that and be faithful today, So, yeah.
That answer, though, is brilliant because the way I think of it is being faithful and showing up and trying to discern what he's saying in your life.
Yeah.
When you die and you get to face him, ultimately, what are you hoping that he says? Right? What is it?
That's well done.
Well done. Good end.
Faithful servant. Faithfulness.
Faithful.
Yeah.
You said it.
For sure. Yeah.
You said it.
No, that is it. And instead of asking myself, am I making the right decision about this or that situation? It's how do I be faithful in this moment? What's the faithful thing? Because that may not, it may not be. I'm not going to be controlled about by the future.
Well, James talks about that too. Talk about James.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go worry about what we're going to go and conquer and do because there's enough worry today.
And it's probably going to go well. It's going to go. God's in control of that future no matter what. Our times are in his hands.
100%. But we got to give it to him first, I think.
Yeah, our times are in his hands, whether we whether we understand that or not. They are in his hands. Recognize that he loves you. He does care about you. He already knows what's going to happen to you. Be faithful in the work today. Work for the sake of the work. Give everything you have into that work, and that's the best you can do. That's the only thing you actually have any influence over.
We could go deeper in this. And you're right, because discernment is a factor in there, and priority, and how do you know it's God talking to you, right? And I think there's lots of good things there, and I've heard lots of good content around the order of operations of things, but
yeah,
it's practicing, right? So, okay. So speaking of being faithful,
yeah,
that led you to a path of creating
yeah,
something from scratch.
yeah,
Okay. So big corporate guy,
yeah,
no problem getting your hands dirty,
yeah,
figuring
yeah.
out how to build, but talk about Common Ground Surf
Sure, yeah.
and the
Oh,
start of
yeah,
that,
yeah,
where
yeah,
it came from.
yeah. The life in the city at the beach in California is just the most. It's kind of the craziest thing,
So this is California, and
Yeah,
you have a nonprofit
Huntington
called
Beach.
Common Ground
Yep,
Surf, and this is
Huntington Beach.
appealing to them. Huntington
Yeah,
Beach
Huntington
specifically.
Beach. In that area, the zip code right next to where I live is the most expensive zip code in the United States, Newport Beach. It's the wealthiest neighborhood in America. On the other side of my town, in my town, is one of the highest concentrations of low income immigrant families.
Really?
Yeah. Just like on both sides.
Dichotomy, yeah.
Yeah. And how does that even exist? And what tensions does that create in a city? What we discovered. So it was about 10 years ago, and I'm kind of describing other people's work right now.
Okay.
I'm the chairman, but I didn't do this. Some college guys decided, hey, you know what? We should care about those kids. So they took their surfboards in and took a van and started knocking on doors, said, would you like to learn how to surf? Most of those kids, high school and middle school kids, had never been to the beach, yet they live in Huntington Beach.
What?
They don't have transportation. They don't have privileges. So just started taking them down, teaching them to surf.
Wow.
Hey, so next summer, let's do it again. Started a club. That became a Bible study. And that was 10 years ago. And that's just been consistent. And my son, who was a high schooler at that time, was new to the city, didn't have any friends. So those became his friends.
So these guys that were already doing this surfing thing?
2 college kids who are friends of mine now.
And your son learned to surf, assuming?
And my son also became fluent in Spanish.
Because of
of this relationship.
Incredible.
And it's just a super amazing story. But anyway, this mentoring organization now.
Okay.
We actually are an organization. We have daily programs for mentoring kids. We have summer camps, winter camps, and the lives that have been impacted there is just off the charts. The families, they're impacted. Those families, those low income, largely Hispanic families living in that concentrated situation understand God's grace much more clear than the city around them.
That is incredible.
And we kind of realized at some point that when we say common ground, we're really looking for common ground.
I love that word.
The ministry is to all the churches around that area that don't have visibility to that situation. But seeing those kids and seeing, we have kids who have gone through our program and are now coming back and serving.
How many do you think you would guess have been impacted positively that have gone through it?
We typically are serving about 70 kids at any given time. So multiplied over 10 years, some kids have gone through 8 years of the program.
Really?
Did middle school and high school.
So 70 is kind of the capacity as of now.
70 is our normal capacity. And I would guess probably 400 or 500 kids over the years.
Incredible.
Serving meals every week.
I guess their lives have changed in some ways.
Oh, absolutely.
What would be an example of someone that came from this no transportation, someone poured into him, he learned a skill, but he found common ground, probably both in human faith, relationships, but also faith.
Oh, absolutely. Kids getting baptized.
Wow. In Huntington Beach?
At the beach. We take them down to the beach and we do baptisms. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's phenomenal. Yeah. It's incredible. And, the problems of that community or any community are pretty intransigent. You don't have this expectation that you can turn things around overnight. But gang violence has decreased in that neighborhood over 10 years. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm sure how have the parents of these kids been impacted?
Oh yeah. The parents are like, you mean you're taking my kid to camp? The parents are like
blown away. Like, why would you do that?
But they love it because it's an opportunity the kids never would get. But the kids at the high school on the other side of the town don't even know those kids exist,
And the word common ground is so powerful because I think if we really think about it, and there's 2 sides of common ground that I love. One is we're both human.
Yeah.
So if we're both human and God says, love God, love others, others are other humans, period.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Period,
and all day we walk around and better than, less than. Those are the people God specifically calls out in scripture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the least of these.
Yeah.
And the common ground piece around faith is another challenge. And my hope in someday around a mission of nonprofit for me is to create common ground with other Christian denominations.
Sure.
So we have this right, wrong, and different religion, drama, and for lack of a better word, and this disconnect between, rituals and rules and regulations, as opposed to one common ground, which is why I love our church, is, help people find and follow Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
So if faith connects us common ground among believers, let's do more together.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a pretty cool thought.
No, you're spot on. I mean, it is, you said it right at the start, that it's about relationships, and we tend to want to have people just like ourselves, but the kingdom of God really is about diversity, people coming together. People are your wife is the opposite of you.
100%.
There you go. Unity, big time. Finding unity in that,
I think that's such a fascinating concept. So, okay. So I got to bring this up. This is your book, Out of the Silent City, right? And you wrote this when, and what's it about? And where did the inspiration come from? Because I've read it, and I'm not a big reader, as I told you. Look at these notes. I just went nuts on this thing. That's so cool.
I appreciate you reading that. Well, okay. So when I was working in San Jose in Silicon Valley, that meant I was flying up and down the state.
So you got time to kill.
So no, what that meant was I lived in a neighborhood and didn't know anybody in the neighborhood because I was up there.
They call that a bedroom community. Well, for you, it was. Yeah.
Right. So I didn't know my neighbors at all. But then the pandemic hit. And so suddenly I was working on my front porch.
Like, who's this guy?
Like I'd lived there for 10 years, and suddenly my neighbor's like, who are you? So what happened was, and this is just sort of the circumstance that dictated this. Suddenly is having conversations literally about the gospel with my neighbors walking by.
Inadvertently?
Yeah, just having a conversation. People come in, what are you doing? What are you reading? I said, well, I'm reading Bible, and so we talk about it, and various things.
Yeah.
And so the book kind of recounts a lot of that.
That's cool.
And those conversations. And it was just, look, before I recognized God's grace, look, I was a believer since I was in 5th grade, but an understanding of, grace is what defines you. It didn't happen until like 10, 12 years ago, but it changes the way you think about relationships with non-believers, because before that, I saw sharing the gospel as a transaction, a box I needed to check, something I needed to do.
Yep.
When I recognized grace, suddenly it was like sharing myself with them. It was like being a friend, and everything. But the thing about that story, the pandemic was this weird thing that reality became detached, And so this illustration that I use right at the beginning of the book is that the gospel is the red pill. It's the thing that causes you to see everything differently.
Yes.
And you sort of get this idea that the world around you kind of thinks the things they can see are the real things, but no, it's the unseen things. The real things are the unseen things. The truth about reality is in the gospel. And it's not difficult at all to make those connections, And so that was the conversation. And so it was like every day I was like waking up thinking, oh, here's a new application for the gospel. And so wrote the book about it. Yeah.
What's amazing about that is, and again, common ground, you found common ground in a movie, in a secular movie.
Yeah.
Right. That's relatable to the gospel.
Yeah.
And I feel like when we find common ground as humans, we have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
One-on-one.
Yeah.
And then when we're intentional about being real with people, the more that happens. And that's really the point.
Yeah.
Like, we get stuck on, and so the red pill.
Yeah.
This is where I think it gets deeper, because in the movie, he goes, take the red pill and see how far down this rabbit hole goes. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the Bible. And as you go deeper, what happens?
Deeper and deeper.
And the more you realize what you know, the more you realize what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're right. That one thing that changes your perspective is that saving grace, and that I can't earn my way no matter what I do, but I need to love others and treat them the way that God treated them. So
this conversation happened in Silicon Valley one time. One of my closest friends is a Russian mathematician. Okay.
That's interesting.
Seriously.
What's his name?
Sergey.
There you go.
Yeah. True story. How do I have this relationship with a Russian mathematician? He's the most smartest guy I know, but one of the things in Silicon Valley is everybody kind of has this mentality that you can measure everything. You can reduce the world to data. But when I bring up, like, what is truth? Sergey goes, what is truth? And he just sounds like Pontius Pilate, and I say, no, truth is not this abstract idea. It's a person.
Oh man.
And when you understand truth as a person, I am the way, the truth, and life, then truth is always growing. It's always expanding. It's not something that you reduce to a set of ones and zeros.
That's neat.
Yeah.
So I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Yeah.
Jesus is saying this.
He's truth. You know him, you know truth, but it doesn't mean you know all the truth.
Right.
I mean, it means the more you get to know him, which will take an eternity, the more you're going to know about truth. But it kind of gives you a ground to stand on.
Yeah, it totally does. And in that scripture is great because when you hear Jesus was a man, right? And there's proof that he existed, and he comes to this earth and he makes claims that he is God. He is put to death for these claims. Who would do that?
Yeah.
Right. And so the atheists, and among others, and this is what's so fascinating about our faith, is that it's one of three things. Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Yep.
I am one with the Father. And so if you can't believe that, if he's truth and he came here and said that, it's three options. We either believe him, right? Or he's a liar, or he's crazy.
Right, yeah.
And we have to do something with that.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. All right. So the segue to from a gospel book to a business book. What's the name of the book, and when's it coming out, and who's it for?
I'll probably pick the name of the book the day it publishes. Right now, it's called The Art. So it started off as Data is Like Water. I had to ditch that.
Ripple effect?
I had to ditch that title. Then it turned into Data-Driven. Right now, the title is The Art of the Decision.
Okay.
All
right.
And so it's about creating, so the subtitle sticks. It's creating a foundation for corporate thought.
That's good.
And trying to get, I really do believe that data really does have the potential to unify a company. Data is true, but data is not the truth.
It has to be interpreted.
You have to be humble enough to listen to the data, but also circumspect enough to recognize that it leads you to the knowledge, not is the, you can't being data driven. Everybody thinks they're data driven, but what has that led to? Even Gavin Newsom looks back and has regrets, about
making
what
decisions
he did,
on the data,
making decisions on the data, so, and he admits it. The problem with data is there's always more data. And the data you don't know may change your view of the data you do know. So it forces you to have some humility, but it also forces you to listen to the data, Wow. And so I kind of feel like if we can get that perspective where people trust data, but also understand that it's intended to help drive better decisions. Decisions are still just things that need to be made, and unity is what a company needs.
Yeah, sure.
Thinking together, creating harmony. As a believer, I really do think we can bring unity to a company.
Yeah, totally.
In whatever small way we can. I love what you said in the past. You said something about the cultural mandate. I like that we can actually make a tangible contribution to the life of non-believers
100%.
In the workplace.
Yeah.
If we can make a difference in the workplace, we're really serving people. It's loving your neighbor.
Well, God created. We had the garden and the two humans in it, and says, "This is all of yours."
Right.
Subdue it and make use of its vast resources. And still, the truth today is that we're creators. Just like we, made in His image. But okay, so that data parallel to faith.
Yeah,
I like that. But in data, in terms of what's the one thing that is being missed in why this book helps others? Like if I'm a big executive and I believe in data, and I already have some things going and I use business intelligence across the organization, but what is one thing that would change the way I think that I need to start be considering?
I'll go pretty abstract to start.
That'll help.
See where it goes. The idea that you remember Henry Ford when you don't remember, but what did he do for automobiles? He didn't invent the car.
Right.
All he did was think differently about how to make cars. He kind of understood the value of a flow and putting structure to that process. The idea that, I should structure your thoughts sounds kind of offensive to our generation.
Yeah, perhaps.
Like, what do you mean you're trying to control my thoughts? I'm an independent thinker,
Right. No, get out. Yeah.
But actually saying, no, there is a framework, and decision-making is a workflow. And if we put some thought to the structure of decisions and we allow data to support that, then our decisions become more fluid. We start thinking together. We start seeing things. We spend less time sitting around debating about the numbers and more time thinking about the future. And we speak the same language. There are just fundamental kind of universal ideas on how data can make the corporate decision process more fluid.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's I got this data, now I can make the decisions. Well, sometimes there's a layer of operations and how we should be thinking about the data.
Yeah.
So changing the way we think about data by creating, business plan and creating data that supports that to make decisions. But 2, sounds like part of your next step in future is helping others, maybe building that process and integrating into their own corporation. So how can people reach you and know more about that?
Well, I mean, and just to back that up a little bit, I've seen this happen at large scale, and so, one of the factors that prevents people from doing this is just belief that it can be done, so I do feel like I actually can help people even with their belief that they can do it. So the book should at least do that. My hope is that, my hope is that some people take this and try to launch it within and just see where that ship goes.
That's great.
So, you can find me on Amazon or LinkedIn, but I probably would say if somebody came to me and said, hey, I want to give this a try, I'd say, let me help you understand what you're trying to do. Maybe I might give you a little assessment of where you really are, that outside in thinking, and then you launch your ship. Let's see where it ends up. And I hope it drives you forward a little bit.
Right. Right. And that's it. Progress, progress over perfection.
Yeah, no, but my mentor way back a year ago, when I told him I was going to do this, he was like, are you all in? He says, do you care? Are you just trying to manipulate something, or are you really believe in what you're doing? And I really am anxious to see if it
resonates the same way.
If it really does accelerate. Because here's the thing, I think this really is a Henry Ford moment.
Really?
I really do. Yeah. No, seriously, I'm not making this up.
Hey man,
when
not someone has lightning in a bottle, they don't really realize what they have.
Yeah, I'm not trying to dramatize this. The place we're at with data today, we're about 20 years into the big data world, really. It's about 20 years ago that big data was sort of recognized as a thing. Henry Ford was 20 years into the automaking industry. Changing the way we think about data. Everybody thinks that they're a data miner and a scientist, Basically, we're craftsmen making cars,
That's good.
We can get a lot more done, with this. And I think we're at that moment.
Oh,
because,
that's so cool.
CIOs, CEOs, they think that you go spend some money on technology,
Let's put in a new
spend
analytics
$60 million on
ERP.
SAP and you solve that problem. That doesn't change your decision making at all.
It's a tool.
It's a great tool.
If used correctly.
I love SAP. That it doesn't make your decisions better. Sorry.
Yep. I mean, if it's used correctly, and if you have the right structure.
There are things. There are contributions that system will make. It's not what you think it is, though.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Anyway, I think corporate leaders need an awareness the next level down, and hopefully I give them the courage, because it takes courage to try to transform,
to make change.
I'm trying to reverse the way people do things. I'm trying to reverse corporate decision making.
And it's a bunch of a believer as well, too, going upstream.
Yeah, it's definitely a going upstream thing.
Woo!
The only way I can do that, the only way I could possibly pull it off is maybe write a book and see if people.
Hey, let's start there.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, this has been incredible. Zane Hall, a friend, mentor, father of 4, grandfather of 5, business, nonprofit chairman, now entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very
exciting. And the launch of the book. So stay tuned. Yeah. Thank you for joining the show. We look forward to connecting with you next time. Dude.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Good conversation.
I have this habit. I have a habit of going long, and I love that. But I have to figure
I'm assuming you're an editor.
My people.